Hey, welcome back to my channel, guys. Got something crazy in the mail today. We have a Torp TC500 controller for the Sur-ron. Today's video, I'm going to go ahead and unbox this. I'm going to get it installed on the bike. I'm going to look at the display and the configuration of the display on the bike and the app. Also, give you my thoughts along the way, take it for a test ride, and give you my final review. So stay tuned. Let's get this going. Let's get this thing unboxed. All right, we open it up. What we have here is the cover, the front cover. Oh, it's a nice matte finish with this gloss inlay here. Very nice. We have the wiring harness that plugs into the controller, and then the main wiring harness on the Sur-ron. They sent along what their version of the egg rider is. So you can see here, this is Torp branded. So this would replace the stock display. This controller also works without this display. It works with the stock display if you don't want to get this display. So, but I'm gonna do the review with this display. So we have instructions. Looks like we have some black or white decals, and we have the actual controller. Let's take a look. These are for the controller. All the tools you'll need to install it, including some bolts. It's hefty. I mean, it weighs a decent amount. I would still say it's probably less weight than the actual stock controller, but you can tell this is potted. There's no empty space in there. This is kind of hefty. Finish looks really nice. The quality feels good. All in all, this looks like a quality product so far. So we're gonna go ahead and get into the installation. So we're here, we're gonna install this on my Stock Sur-ron with the stock battery. The only mods on this bike are obviously just the decals, the handlebars, cosmetics really. First things, we're gonna go ahead and take the battery out. We wanna get that out first. Actually, what we want to do is drain the capacitors from the controller before we take the battery out. So we turn the fuse off. We turn the bike on. We wait for it to die. You saw the display up here go away, and then the battery went away. Should be good now. So with that off, we can take the battery out. We'll just set that over here. We'll make sure that that doesn't have any power, and then we're ready to take out the controller. All right, let's start with this one up here. Same on the other side. These two screws will let you pull out this plastic piece that exposes the larger screws that are actually holding it in up there. That one was tight. So you need actually no technical electrical knowledge to do this installation. It doesn't require a ton. It's a super simple installation. Just a matter of taking this controller off, which we're gonna do here, and sticking the new one on. So this shouldn't be a difficult process. Okay. For this, we're gonna need to take out the bash guard. Well, we want to take it off. We'll take the front screws out, loosen the bottom screws, let it lean forward so we can get access to the phase wires. That bash guard should come down a little bit, like such. And now our controller is kind of just hanging there. So now we want to undo these screws, and we're going to pull this piece a little forward to expose the harnesses inside. We got that guy. We're going to lift this lid up and just kind of grab a hold of this and pull it forward, just so that we can get to these wires here. And then we should be able to pull these wires down and get to the connectors. That horn wire in the way, just move it a little bit. And there's the connectors. So what we want to do is go ahead and disconnect these. And we got that done. Then we want to disconnect all the phase wires. And there we have the stock controller. And we're going to take off this whole bracket here. We have those brackets off. And now what we're going to do is take some of the bolts that they have. We're going to mount the Torp controller to these top two bolts here. So on the back of the controller we have these two screw holes here. They provide the hardware for that. Once you get those hand threaded a little bit like that. All right, you got the controller on. You just want to take this hall sensor cable, tuck it behind the controller, just like that. We're gonna go ahead and do the phase wires. On here we have blue, green, yellow. We're already in that order, so blue, green, yellow, positive, negative, so black and red. Let's go ahead and get that going. And be sure you are putting the right ones on the right color, because that would not be great if you mess that part up. Green is secure. So you might have to move these cables around that hall sensor just to make sure you get enough room. Okay, so you don't want to over crank or tighten these. You just want to give it a nice good tightening with your arm, your hand here. Make sure they're on solid. And our phase wires and our battery terminals are connected. All right, so now we want to get the bash guard back in place. All right, bash guard's in place. Now we're going to connect the wiring harness to the Sur-ron's plugs here. Important step here is making sure when you push these in that you get this audible click. 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 If that doesn't sound right, you can try tugging on it, see if it comes out, but it did not. Got one more here. Click. We're going to put this is the most important part of the harness right here, the one that connects to the controller. Make sure you give it a good push and listen for the click. Click. We're good. I like this design, the fact that the harness is aiming down, and if water splashes up, it's just gonna roll off and not come up. There are some harnesses where the harness plugs in horizontally like this, and there's a chance for water to seep in, but this is good. So we got that. So at this part of the video, if you are not going to use the Torp display, just go ahead and skip forward. I'm going to take the next few minutes to do the cable routing for the new display. I'm going to take off the old display and put the new one in. I was going to have to take this off anyway, so what I've done so far is I've just taken off the grip, the brake, a button on here for turning on and off the headlight. So those things are all off. And then I've taken this panel off and the lid cover so I can get to this stuff in here. And then I want to follow these wires, which are these two in my hand. This one, this one. Then we can slide that stock display completely off. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get this Torp display mounted. We're gonna leave it loose for now so that we can adjust it to where the grip is. We're going to route it back down through where those other cables were, but this time we're gonna poke out because it's gonna connect to that wiring harness that got sent with the Torp controller. Feeding it through, this is where it's going to connect. So these are covered up. Obviously it's just a fake plug to make sure that it's protected if you're not using their display. So if you're gonna use it, just pull it out like you would a normal plug. Take your display cable, make sure it clicks in there nice. We're just getting this ignition put back in place. Make sure that these wires aren't pinched underneath this bracket here. So I want to note that it's super important that you're using the stock fuse with this controller. They recommend not using the controller without this stock fuse. So if you've already replaced that or you had a different controller, make sure you get this back in the bike. All right, so once you've got your wiring harness all hooked up, if you're running the display, you've got that hooked up, we're ready to push this wiring mess back into place. This part can be tricky. There's a mess of cables back here and they don't necessarily like to go back in. You definitely don't want something to be pinched. Get that hole lined up, get a screw in there. Okay, so we got the display all wired up. I got the brake, this headlight button, my grip back on, and some nice cablings. All right, so we take this plastic, we're gonna slide it down into the bottom here. It goes underneath the skid plate. All the wiring harness cables need to be kind of pulled down and tucked behind this piece. You can get it just right. Then you get these bolts that they provide. We'll get them in there. So So what we're going to go ahead and do is download the app now. This is an actual iOS App Store app or an Android Play Store app. I just went into iOS App Store, searched for Torp Controller. We're going to go ahead and open that, and it's going to search for device. We don't have one plugged in yet. So go ahead, get the battery in here. Turn the breaker back on. We're going to go ahead and turn the key on, make sure the display comes on. We got an eco with exclamations. We're gonna go ahead and put the bike on the stand. We see the Torp, we connect to it. It's got a kickstand error, and just like that, we're ready to go. Next, we're gonna configure the app and go into the details there. All right, so we're on the app. We're gonna go ahead and update the throttle configuration, calibrate the throttle, and we're going to calibrate the hall sensor as well. So we're gonna go to calibration and hit select light B. So we got motor calibration. Make sure the wheel is off the ground. All right, we're gonna go next. Throttle calibration, slowly twist and release. We'll leave it at that. Now it gives us an option to change direction if we need to change it. Looks good. Finish and save. All right, we're set. All right, we got it all installed, guys. I just want to take a second to go ahead and thank Torp for sending me out this controller. Let me test it, do a video on this for you guys so that you know, can be more informed on this controller. I think it looks nice. I like the finish. Now let's just take a few minutes and go over the app. Let's go over the app and look at all the different settings that you can do. I'm on this far right informational screen here. And this is where you would do like a bunch of the calibration diagnostics and things like that. So at the very top, kind of talks about firmware version, your model and serial number. You can change your speed units and your temperature units here. You can scan for your Bluetooth controller if it doesn't connect. You can look at error logs here. You can update your firmware. I recommend updating that as soon as you get it. Mine's updated. The ride logs, which is super cool. The measure time, this is like kind of like a 0 to 60 monitor, which is cool. Diagnostics on the bike and everything else like that. Calibration, like we talked about, that'll let you calibrate the controller or the throttle and the motor, and then the advanced setting, throttle and field weakening and things like that. Let's go into the next one from the right, the settings here. This is where you can change your sport mode and eco mode. So let's start in eco mode. I'm going to set mine at 5.6 kilowatt. That is basically the stock speed. The second bar here is the phase amps. 450 is kind of where I like it. You can go all the way up to 500. I would say that's a difference between this controller and others, is that it maxes out at 500 phase amps. The RPM, this is like your speedometer, your speed limiter. You can throttle it down if you need to. And then regen, like throttle release regen and brake lever regen. So if you hold this down, it's going to give you 60 amps of brake, which is a lot actually. So we'll turn that down to maybe 40. In here you have a battery option. I have stock because I have the stock battery, but if you have a aftermarket battery or a bypassed stock battery, you can choose it here. Then it shows you your voltages on that. Kickstand sensor or crash sensor, you can turn those on and off. And then this mode button down here, this Torp display, that is if you are using the Torp display. If you're not, you can choose the normal button for the stock display or off if you removed your display altogether. And then in that case, you would only have a sport mode option. If we look at a sport mode, and what differentiates this controller compared to most is that this controller talks to the BMS. Without a bypass, I can actually up my battery current to 120 amps. That gives me 7.3 kilowatt, which you can't do, as far as I know, with any other controller on a stock non-bypass battery. Again, we have a phase amps, you know, the battery current there. So everything else is the same. So on this one, I'm using 7.3 kilowatt for my sport, and then the stock setting for my eco mode. On this battery icon down here, this shows you the whole diagnostic, and if you're running the stock battery with no bypass, gives you everything that you need to know here. If you have a bypass stock battery, it still gives you some information, but just not all the information. So here we can see cells, our temperatures, everything else as far as that goes. We can look at different parts of the battery. I mean, this talks to the BMS and it holds all the logs. We can look at the battery error history, how many errors it's had ever, and the charging history, which is pretty crazy to think that you can go back and see how many times you've charged and log all that stuff. What time it was, what day. The next option here is your informational display showing you your min voltage, your live, whatever it currently is, and your max voltage. And then we have our classic main display. We have a kickstand warning because the kickstand's down, our temperatures, our voltages, RPM, trip meter, like how many miles are going in the trip, how much you've regenerated as percentage, consumption. This is all awesome information. Just right from here. So running that while you're running the bike is kind of a nice thing. That's it for the phone app. Let's look at the display. So on this display, you have two options right now, and it sounds like they're gonna add more just by their verbiage that they said. So you can push this button to go between eco and sport, and then these up and down buttons will show you your peaks, talk about like your firmware versions for the LCD and the controller, last error, last warning. The last warning was the kickstand cut off, your temperature units and your speed units. And to set these, you could just use this button on the top to go in here and change those. And to switch down to the next one, you hold that button in a little bit longer and it switches down, and then you can use the button to switch between those. So those are those settings on the display. With all that now out of the way, all we can do is take it for a test ride. All right, one thing I didn't talk about in this mode here was the throttle settings. So if we come down here to the bottom of this settings display on my sport mode, and I come in here to throttle settings, this is where you can change your like throttle response. The throttle curve is this line here, and right now this is 0%, which is true linear really. So if you want to ramp up quicker, you would make the curve more aggressive, so giving you more power early on and tapering off, or you can gradually ramp it up and have the curve ramp up toward the end. I like the true linear at 0%, but that's just me. That's a personal setting. Dead zone is how much throttle you can turn before it engages, and the brake lever and thumb response is like how long it takes for it to actually engage. You can also calibrate the throttle from this menu as well as the other one I showed you. That out of the way, let's get on a ride. Just coming out of the driveway, I can feel it. It definitely has more power than stock. Yeah, it's punchy, and I don't even have the phase amps set up that high. Let's feel that regen brake on the brake. Whoa, probably a little sensitive. I mean, you can make that brake as strong as you want with that regen. I'm gonna change that down to like 30 amps. Definitely a little touchy, like barely squeezing it, almost locking up the tire. Yeah, that has pep, like it's fast compared to the stock. I would say it definitely has more top speed too. And I don't even have field weakening turned on. So right there, I watched my regen come in at 7%. Yeah, it definitely has more bite than the stock bike. Like the stock bike, you can definitely spin a wheel, but not like as easy as this. All right, I'm gonna turn up the phase amps up to 500. Since I'm in the dirt, this is what I would typically do if I'm just gonna be rallying around and not wheeling. The throttle gets a little bit more snappy at that point. So we'll set that to 500, see how we do. Yeah, that definitely makes it jumpier. Wheel just is coming up. Yeah, the wheel just wants to come up. Feeling good. Definitely totally different bike than stock. Feels really good. Like there is definitely power coming from this bike. I didn't expect it to be as much as it is. I mean, it's feeling really good. So they've been doing construction in my field that I make all my little jumps and tracks in, and look at this, they set up this nice little jump for me almost. Like it'd be rude not to hit it. Good stuff. All right, let's see how it does with some wheelies. Definitely a smooth throttle. Like I'm kind of worried about that. Yeah, it's got really smooth throttle control. So I'm telling you guys, this bike is a different bike now. Let's do one more test. We'll turn the field weakening up and see if we can get above 47. Oh, I do like having the regen on there and not ruining my pads. All right, so you can see here I have 0 amps on field weakening. We're gonna just put this in the middle. Yeah, see here it tells you some warnings there, motor temperature stuff. We recommend limiting the current below 50 amps to minimize potential drawbacks. So we're at 49 amps. We're below 50. Let's see how fast we can go. Our top speed before was 47 on the actual GPS.
So you can see there that 52 was the max I'm gonna get. So definitely more than a stock. All right, you guys, I'm gonna wrap up the video there. If you're new to my channel, feel free to subscribe, get future content on this Torp controller and against maybe my other bike over there with the Co and the Chai battery. Leave a comment if you have questions. Like the video, it helps my channel grow, and you know, I really appreciate it. So my next video will probably be getting my son on this bike. He rides this bike a little bit more than I do, so I'm gonna get his impressions on this and kind of surprise him that the bike has an upgrade. So stay tuned. Until the next time, keep the rubber side down.